It started with little things. At first, I thought I was just imagining it. An extra pair of shoes by the door, dishes in the sink that I definitely hadn't used, the faint sound of the shower running, when I knew my roommate was supposed to be at work. Nothing major, just small details that didn't add up. Then there was the food. I'd opened the fridge and noticed leftovers missing, or half a carton of milk gone overnight. I'm not the type to obsess over every bite. But when you live with one other person, you know what belongs to you and what doesn't. One night I came home late, exhausted, and I swear I heard voices coming from the living room. At first I thought my roommate had friends over, which was fine, it happens sometimes. But when I walked in, there was a blanket and a pillow neatly laid out on the couch, like someone had been staying there. I brushed it off, telling myself maybe my roommate had a late-night guest. Maybe it was just temporary. But then, it kept happening. The blanket stayed. More shoes appeared. The bathroom counter was suddenly cluttered with toiletries that didn't belong to either of us. It wasn't until I walked into the kitchen one morning and found a stranger, half asleep, wearing my roommate's hoodie, making coffee like he owned the place, that I realized this wasn't a one-off. Someone had moved in, and I hadn't been asked, not even once. The morning I officially discovered the truth is burned into my memory. I stumbled into the kitchen, still half asleep, expecting the usual quiet start to my day. Instead, there was a guy I'd never seen before, standing barefoot in front of the coffee machine. He turned and gave me a nod like we'd known each other for years, completely casual, as if it were normal for him to be in my apartment at 7 in the morning. "Morning," he said, like he belonged there. I blinked, confused, waiting for some kind of explanation, but none came. He just went back to pouring coffee, humming under his breath, completely unfazed by my stunned silence. When my roommate finally shuffled in a few minutes later, she acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. She kissed him on the cheek, grabbed a mug, and started chatting about her plans for the day. Meanwhile, I stood there gripping my cereal bowl like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. "Oh, who is this?" I finally asked. My voice cracked, equal parts awkward and irritated. My roommate glanced up startled, as though she'd forgotten that I lived there too. "Oh, this is Alex," she said breezily. "He's been staying here a few nights." A few nights? By the looks of it, the shoes, the toiletries, the blanket on the couch, it had been a lot more than that. Alex gave me a small wave, utterly relaxed. "Hope it's cool. Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way." "No, and painter, idén, oban, cool?" Sessinsi. He already made himself at home in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, using my dishes. My pulse quickened as I forced out a polite smile. But inside my head, alarm bells were blaring. This wasn't just an overnight guest. This was someone moving in, piece by piece, right under my nose. And apparently, no one thought to ask me about it. That first real conversation with Alex was one of the most awkward moments of my life. Later that evening, I walked into the living room to find him sprawled across the couch, remote in hand, flipping through channels like he'd lived there for years. My roommate was nowhere in sight. It was just the two of us. I cleared my throat. "So, you're staying here now?" He looked over at me, completely unbothered, and shrugged. "Yeah, just for a bit. Don't worry, I'll keep things chill. For a bit." The phrase made my stomach twist. That's exactly what my roommate had said. A few nights. But the way his shoes, clothes, and toiletries were piling up, it felt less like a guest and more like a new roommate I never agreed to. I tried to keep my tone calm. "You know, it would have been nice if someone asked me first. This isn't really what I signed up for when I moved in here." He chuckled like I was overreacting. "Yeah, I get it. But hey, I'll help out with groceries sometimes, all right? No big deal." "Groceries?" as if tossing a loaf of bread into the cart once in a while made up for the fact that he was now living rent-free in a place I paid half for. The conversation fizzled after that, mostly because he didn't seem interested in hearing my concerns. He turned his attention back to the TV, and I retreated to my room, fuming. It wasn't just awkward, it was infuriating. Here was a stranger, making himself comfortable in my home, brushing off my discomfort like it was a minor inconvenience. And the worst part, I knew the real conversation needed to happen, not with him, but with my actual roommate. Because if I didn't draw the line soon, this few nights was going to turn into something permanent. When I finally brought it up to my roommate, I expected at least some kind of acknowledgement, maybe an apology, maybe even an awkward laugh. What I got instead was denial. I caught her in the kitchen one night after Alex had gone out. "Hey," I started carefully. "We need to talk about him staying here." She looked up from her phone, frowning. "What about it?" "You didn't ask me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I came home one day and suddenly there's another person living here. That's not what we agreed to when we signed the lease." She waved her hand dismissively, like I was exaggerating. "He's not living here. He just crashes sometimes. It's temporary." Temporary. That word again. I almost laughed. "Come on. His stuff is all over the place. He uses the kitchen, the shower. He's basically moved in." She rolled her eyes. "You're making it sound like a big deal. He's not hurting anyone. Besides, you're barely even home half the time. What difference does it make?" That stung. Not only was she brushing off my concern, but she was flipping it back on me, as though my schedule somehow made my opinion irrelevant. I pressed on. "It makes a difference because I live here too. I pay rent. I signed the lease. If someone new is staying here full-time, that's a conversation we should both be part of. You can't just decide for both of us." Day. She sighed, clearly annoyed. "You're being dramatic. He doesn't even eat that much, and he's helping me with errands. It's not like he's freeloading." The denial was infuriating, not just her refusal to admit what was happening, but the way she dismissed my feelings like they didn't matter. In that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't just about Alex moving in. It was about respect. And right now my roommate was showing me she didn't have any. It didn't take long for Alex's presence to shift from temporary to impossible to ignore. At first, it was little things. His shoes multiplying by the door, his hoodie draped over a dining chair, his toothbrush taking up permanent residence next to mine in the bathroom. Then came the bigger things. A stack of his video games on the TV stand, his jacket hanging in the closet, even a laptop charger plugged in permanently by the couch. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like theirs. Meals became especially frustrating. I'd go to cook dinner and find him already in the kitchen, spreading out ingredients like it was his domain. He'd offer me some, like it was a generous gesture. But half the time he was using groceries I had bought. And when I pointed it out, he'd just laugh and say, "Relax, we're all sharing here." The bathroom was even worse. Towels piled up, long showers left no hot water, and bottles of shampoo and body wash cluttered every shelf. Once, I came home late and found him coming out of the bathroom in nothing but a towel. That was the moment I realized there was officially no such thing as privacy in my own home anymore. And my roommate? She acted like none of it was happening. Whenever I brought it up, she'd shrug and say, "It's just for now, don't stress." But every day, for now, looked more and more like forever. I started spending less time in the common areas, retreating to my room just to avoid the constant awkwardness. But even then, I could hear them laughing in the living room, cooking together, watching movies, like they were the actual tenants, and I was just a guest in my own apartment. It was maddening. Every corner of the place screamed his presence, and every time I bit my tongue, I felt my resentment growing. This wasn't just encroachment. It was invasion. The breaking point came faster than I expected. One night, after a long day at work, all I wanted was to collapse on the couch and watch some mindless TV. But when I walked into the living room, Alex was stretched out across the entire sofa, game controller in hand, yelling into a headset while playing online with his friends. A half-empty pizza box and 2 cans of soda sat on the coffee table, leaving barely any space for me to set down my bag. I cleared my throat. "Hey, could you move over? I kinda wanna sit down." He glanced at me briefly, then turned back to the game. "Hang on, almost done." 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I stood there, like an unwanted guest in my own apartment, listening to him laugh and shout into the mic, my frustration bubbling higher with each passing second. Finally, I snapped. "Alex, I live here too. Get off the couch." He gave me a look like I was the unreasonable one, but he shifted grudgingly to make space. By then, though, the damage was done. My roommate, who had been in the kitchen, came in and frowned at me. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Because he's here all the time. He eats our food, uses our stuff, and takes over the entire apartment. And I'm sick of feeling like a guest in my own home." She crossed her arms. "You're overreacting. He's not hurting anyone." That was it. The moment the pressure, the frustration, the constant dismissal boiled over, my voice shook, but it was loud enough to cut through the tension. "This isn't just about him staying over. This is about respect. You didn't ask me, and you've ignored me every time I've tried to bring it up. I can't keep living like this." The room went quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, heavy, waiting for the inevitable explosion. And I knew then, the real fight was coming. The fight happened that same night, and it was ugly. As soon as Alex disappeared into the bedroom, I turned to my roommate. I was done with hints, done with polite reminders. "We need to talk, now." She sighed dramatically, like I was inconveniencing her. "What is it this time?" I stared at her in disbelief. "This time? Are you kidding me? He's been living here for weeks without me agreeing to it. He eats my food, takes over the living room, hogs the shower, and you keep pretending it's temporary. It's not temporary. He's moved in." She crossed her arms and shot back. "You're exaggerating. He doesn't even have a key." I laughed bitterly. "He doesn't need a key. He's here more than you are. His stuff is everywhere, and you know it. You didn't ask me. You didn't even give me the courtesy of a conversation. You just decided for both of us." Her tone sharpened. "Well, what was I supposed to do? He needed a place to stay. He's my boyfriend. You'd seriously rather see him homeless?" My hands tightened into fists at my sides. "That's not the point. The point is, you signed a lease with me, not him. If you wanted him here, you should have asked. That's basic respect. Instead, you dumped the responsibility on me and hoped I'd shut up about it." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being selfish. You act like this is just your place. Guess what? I pay rent too." My voice cracked as I snapped back. "Exactly. We pay rent. Which means decisions like this should be made together. But you didn't treat me like a roommate. You treated me like I don't exist." The air was electric. Both of us breathing hard, glaring across the living room like enemies instead of people who had once agreed to share a home. Finally, she spat out, "If you hate it so much, maybe you should move out." The words hung in the air like a knife. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a fight about Alex anymore. It was about whether this living situation could even survive. The aftermath was brutal. For the next few days, the apartment turned into a Cold War zone. My roommate barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was through clipped words or passive-aggressive remarks. Alex, meanwhile, acted like nothing had happened. Still lounging on the couch, still leaving his stuff everywhere, still eating food he hadn't paid for. The silence was worse than yelling. Every time I walked into the kitchen, they'd go quiet, exchanging looks like I was the intruder. I started keeping my food in my room just to avoid arguments. I bought a mini fridge for drinks and snacks, because anything left in the main fridge mysteriously disappeared. Even the small comforts of home felt stolen. The living room, once my place to unwind, became their territory. The bathroom was always occupied. I found myself timing my showers to avoid crossing paths. It was exhausting, suffocating, like living in a house that no longer belonged to me. Friends noticed too. When I vented about it, they were shocked. "He doesn't even pay rent?" they asked. "Why are you putting up with this?" I didn't have a good answer. Part of me felt trapped, tied to the lease, tied to the mess of confrontation I knew would follow if I pushed harder. But every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The same thought circled in my head. This isn't sustainable. Something has to give. The apartment had become toxic, and it wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was about the complete lack of respect between me and the person who was supposed to be my roommate. And deep down, I already knew the truth. This living arrangement was broken beyond repair. The decision came after one particularly bad night. I came home late, drained from work, and found the living room packed with Alex's friends. They were sprawled across the couch, empty beer bottles on the table, music blaring like it was their personal hangout spot. My roommate was laughing with them, completely at ease, while I stood frozen in the doorway of what used to be my apartment. No one even acknowledged me at first. When Alex finally noticed, he just waved casually. "Hey man, grab a drink." That was it. The moment I realized I couldn't keep living like this, I went straight to my room, shut the door, and stared at the walls, the noise from the living room seeping through like a reminder of everything I had lost. My space, my comfort, my peace. By the end of the night, my mind was made up. The next morning I told my roommate flat out, "I'm moving out." She blinked, clearly shocked. What? You're seriously leaving over this?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Because this isn't what I agreed to. You brought someone into our home without asking me. You ignored every time I tried to talk about it. And now this place doesn't feel like mine anymore. I'd rather pay more somewhere else than feel like a guest in the apartment I helped pay for." She tried to argue, throwing out lines about me, overreacting, and how Alex isn't that bad. But I didn't budge. For once, I wasn't asking for compromise. I was drawing the line. By the end of the week, I had found another place. Packing my things felt like peeling off layers of frustration I'd been carrying for months. Every box I taped shut was one step closer to freedom. Leaving wasn't easy, but staying would have been worse. Looking back now, I realized the whole experience taught me more than I expected. Not just about roommates, but about boundaries, respect, and the importance of speaking up before resentment festers. At first, I told myself I could tolerate it. That Alex was just temporary. That my roommate would eventually recognize how unfair it was. But silence became permission, and permission became permanence. By the time I finally exploded, the damage was already done. I learned that when you share a living space, communication isn't optional, it's survival. A roommate who can't respect boundaries will eventually cross them, and if you don't defend your space, they'll act like it was theirs all along. My roommate's refusal to even acknowledge my feelings made it clear. It wasn't just about Alex moving in, it was about how little she valued me as an equal tenant. I also learned that leaving isn't failure, it's self-respect. It's easy to think you should tough it out, or compromise endlessly to keep the peace. But sometimes, walking away is the only real solution. My new place costs me more, yes, but every cent is worth the peace of mind of knowing my home is actually mine. The irony is, I don't even hate Alex. He was just doing what my roommate allowed him to do. The real problem was the person who signed the lease with me, who promised to share a space equally, and then decided her choices mattered more than mine. So now, Whenever someone asks what I look for in a roommate, I have a simple answer: respect. Not just for rent or chores, but for the basic idea that home is shared space. Cross that line, and it stops being home at all. And I'll never let that happen to me again.